Hello everyone, and that's a bit CBBC, wasn't it? Hello everyone and welcome back to The Library is Open. So I hope you've brought your library card, my darlings. How are we all doing? Welcome to a new video, a new episode I should say. This one's a little bit later. My release schedule has been a little bit spasmodic lately. Just because of, things I've had going on with work that have meant that I have less time to make this content, and also just trying to sort of find time for myself and so on and so forth. You're all familiar with the score. It's still a weird time that we're all just adjusting to as and how we can. So anyway, I'm back, and just a couple of bits of housekeeping before we sort of start talking about what I wanted to talk about in this video. Number one, massive congratulations to those vegan guys who have just released their first digital book, Down to Earth Vegan, which is amazing. I can personally attest to that, having been given a sneak peek and also having now read the full version. It's wonderful, packed full of vegan-friendly tips, tricks and tofu, from your favourite vegan YouTubers, those vegan guys. So I'm going to link to where you can get hold of that. It is a free download, but please consider donating to them through PayPal if you have that ability. It's also available on the Amazon, I believe, where it is priced at $1.99, I think. So I will leave a link to that, and I'll also link their book launch video, because it's just a lovely watch and we need to support them because it's fantastic. Second bit of housekeeping. Yes, I mentioned that I've been doing a lot of stuff with work lately, including curating a digital festival of the third year graduating students that I work with. I'm going to link down below to their channel, which contains, I think it's about 27 or 28 brand new pieces of digital performance work that they've created, and you can find out more about the students there and them as artists and have a look at their pieces, so I will also link that. Thirdly, I've got my tea, which I'm drinking in my fabulous GlitterKing mug. This is not sponsored, by the way, or anything like that. It's just GlitterKing is a great friend of mine from the drag circuit and has a shop selling biodegradable, planet-friendly glitters and other cosmetic items, and they've just reopened, so I'm going to link their Instagram bio down below. So much housekeeping. And finally, just for this, I'm wearing this t-shirt today, Not a Phase, Support Trans Lives, which I love, which is a charitable organisation that supports trans and non-binary people, and I'm going to link to them below as well if you want to have a look at what they do. So I think that's everything I had to get off the housekeeping list. I'm sure if not, then I'll add an addendum. And all that information will either be in the pinned comment or the description, depending on my technical capabilities as I edit. So today I want to talk about, this is something of a new thing because it's not a specific book per se, or a set of books. It is a set of books, I should say. It's more generally about the full series, which is massive. So I am talking about Anne M. Martin's, I guess we call them young adult, late 80s, 90s series, The Babysitter's Club. Which I've had a couple of comments and people sort of saying, when they've got like reading fatigue or they're not able to make choices about books and they just kind of want a comfort read. And what I've been doing a lot over lockdown is, so I'm reading the books that I'm reading sort of during the day and so on and so forth, but in the evenings I like to chill out with something more comfortable, where I don't want to say that I'm not engaging the same amount of brain power, but it's a more familiar property, so I'm kind of used to it, and it just brings me a little bit of comfort. I'm also listening to a lot of stuff on audio format as well, and The Babysitter's Club is what I've chosen. Now, The Babysitter's Club is a series that was created in 1986, as I said, by Anne M. Martin, and is primarily it falls into the category of YA. They're not overly long. They follow quite a formulaic pattern in each of the books, but they are very much sort of, it's set up, conflict resolution, everything ends fairly happily at the end, which is kind of what I'm looking for at the moment in like a gentle read. I'll show you a couple of examples of the books. Some of these are the UK covers. This is one, Claudia, Kishi live on air. Another one, these are just random ones, they're not my favourites or anything. Marianne Breaks the Rules. It's the British cover design. And one of the mysteries, which is a spin-off from the main series, Abby and the Notorious Neighbour, and that's the American design. And you can still get all these, I believe, mostly secondhand, although they are producing a new graphic novel version, which is sort of updated, because the original books are very much rooted in the time period that they were in. You know, so no one has mobiles or anything like that. It's all analog telephones and so on and so forth. No internet, blah, 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 etc. So a little bit about the premise of the series. So it centres around 7 girls in Stony Brook, Connecticut, who form a babysitting club. So they range from 11 to 13, which, you know, you kind of have to stretch your credibility a little bit in the sense that, you know, what parents are hiring an 11-year-old to babysit their children, I'm not quite sure. But if you could just skate over that, then it's lovely. So the club consists of Christy, who is the president. She's very sort of bossy and forceful, into baseball, so on and so forth. Claudia, who is the vice president of the business. She gets to be vice president because she has her own phone line and they have their meetings in her room. She's Japanese American, which the series touches on a lot in terms of racism and also like ideas around her culture and so on and so forth. There's Marianne, who's the shy one. She's the secretary of the club. Stacy, who's the treasurer, who is originally from New York, mentions it all the time, and also lives with diabetes, which, you know, they make stuff of in the book as well. There's Dawn, who is from California originally, very sort of Californian, almost stereotype in a way. She's very much like an Earth Mother. Touches on sort of vegan and green issues as well a lot there throughout the series. There is Mallory, who's 11 and loves horses, very bookish, from a large family, and her best friend Jessie, who's the only African American student in their grade at the school where they all attend, who was also a ballet dancer. And later books sort of bring in Abby, who is a twin and is also Jewish, so that touches on sort of her culture as well a lot. And also Logan, who's Marianne's boyfriend, and Shannon, who's a friend of Christie's. You know, the details are not necessarily pertinent unless you're into the series. And the series was very much, I think, geared a lot towards, you know, in that way that they used to do, which I hope is becoming less now, geared towards young girls, as it were, you know, which is like, we don't need to be gearing anything towards anybody. It's, people can read what they want. But I read a lot of these as a child from the library, and I used to buy them from W.H. Smith's, because, you know, they just really sort of clicked with me. I really, really enjoyed them in the same way that I used to enjoy, like, Mallory Towers and St. Clair's from Enid Blyton, you know, and series like that. I like a series that goes on, you know, which is why I prefer TV, I think, to films sometimes, because I like a sort of consistency story. Anyway, so the books very much follow a sort of, they touch on difficult issues, but they're always quite light-hearted, as I said, and there's always a sort of nice wrap-up at the end. And they follow pretty much a formulaic setup. Like, the first chapter introduces the story, the second chapter is always a recap of exactly what the series is about. So as I got older, I started like skipping the second chapter because it would just give you all the details about the characters and stuff, and they're pretty much the same chapter every book. Although that is quite useful and quite smart in terms of, you know, if you're a new reader to the series, you don't have to start with the first book. Because very little moves on in terms of time or anything like that, so they're kind of stuck at the ages they are at the beginning of the series throughout the series, which is pretty extensive. So it's, I think it was about 131, could be 135 original series books, and then there's also the mystery series, which was 35, which does what it says on the tin. It's the Babysitter's Club, but they solve mysteries as well. Some of which are real ones, some of which turn out to be not much of anything, but still pleasurable. They also have the super specials, which are sort of much longer ones with each chapter narrated by one of the characters. Oh, I should say that each book is narrated by a particular character who's named. So, for instance, in Claudia, Kishi Live on Air, Claudia is the narrator. And there's also mystery specials as well. And there's been loads of spin-offs because the Babysitter's Club was huge in its day. There was a movie released in 1995, I believe, starring Rachel Lee Cook and Larissa Olenek, as I recall, who anyone who watched Nickelodeon, or probably Channel 4 actually in this country, will remember from The Secret Life of Alex Mack. And there was a TV series in the 80s as well. But the reason I sort of wanted to make this video is not only to talk about my favourite sort of like comfort reads, but also to talk about the new series of The Babysitter's Club that's just premiered on Netflix. I think it came out a couple of weeks ago. And this is, I think it's 10 episodes, and they're all based on the first 8 books of the series and a super special. One of the super specials where they go to summer camp, which we don't really have in the UK, but that's very much sort of an American thing, and particularly then. And the new series is just delightful. We talked in like previous episodes about adaptations of things. I spoke a little bit about Jekyll and Hyde and so on and so forth. But this is just a brilliant reimagining of the series that retains all the elements of what made the series so wonderful in the books, although it is flawed in places, as I say, cultural representation sometimes, and the way they talk about particular needs or conditions that people live with. I think specifically, just coming off the top of my head, is one of the younger characters they babysit has autism or lives with autism, forgive me there, as does my brother. So like reading that now, it's not dealt with in the way that we would discuss it now if we were talking about it, so there is that sort of proviso if you do go into any of these, that things are very much of their time but are ultimately well intentioned, for the period they were written in. So I'm not sure to what extent they've been rewritten for for redistribution, because I am aware, for instance, that another long-running sort of series, the Nancy Drew Mysteries, which I've also been delving into again, have been rewritten periodically to sort of update things and remove language that might be harmful and or, very sensitive. So I think probably in the graphic novels, but if you get hold of the second-hand copies, as I say, they're probably as were. So that's just a proviso. You have to take some of it with a pinch of salt. But yeah, so the new Netflix series has taken all the great stuff about that, all the wonderful themes of exploration of different cultures, identities, personalities, with this wonderful thingy of friendship and, social responsibility, but fused it with a really sort of 2020 feel. So for instance, in the new series, they are dealing with hot topic issues. Like, I was really delighted in one of the episodes, Marianne Saves the Day, to see that they had touched on trans identifying children, which was just so beautifully and delicately handled, and not played for shock value, although it has caused furore with the Christian right in America, shock horror. But just really sensitively done in a way that feels authentic, and similarly, just they've sort of diversified the racial identities of the characters and dealt with that accordingly. Because I'm aware that the original series is very white dominated, which is said to be a sort of reflection of Connecticut at the time, which is probably true. But now, that's not the world we live in or that we want to project either, which is wonderful. So, they've sort of played around with that, but without disturbing, any of the fundamentals. I mean, there's nothing to be lost in making things more accessible to a modern audience. And they do something wonderful as well, which is like, obviously this world now has mobile phones and so on and so forth. But like in the original books, one of the biggest draws was the fact that Claudia had a landline telephone that was all her own, that people could ring up to make babysitting appointments. And they handle it really well. They just get her to buy a phone off Etsy as like a vintage iconic piece, which made me feel very old. Thanks very much. So it's just like really clever little ways that they've done that. But I think it's just a really great, and seems to be, other than certain political factions or religious factions, seems to be or have been received really, really well. And I think, you know, if that can be used as a springboard to encourage younger people, children and younger people, to revisit the book series, which is extensive. That's what I love so much about it, because it's like, for me, who's like, I have the collector impulse, if you will, to be able to delve into a series with that much material is just a gift. It's wonderful. And I really hope that we see some sort of crossover there between, you know, the books becoming more popular again, and people accessing the Netflix series, which is wonderful. But if you haven't seen it, I really would recommend it. As I say, it's half an hour episodes, 10 of them, and, you know, really capturing the spirit of what made those books, you know, a big part of my childhood in many ways, because they were sort of the backbone of my forays into reading as a kid. And still now, you know, I'm not ashamed to say that I still dip into YA fiction and reread these constantly. I will say that I gravitate more towards the mystery orientated ones. So a couple of favourites are Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls. Claudia, by the way, is the best character. Everybody wants to be Claudia, because she's the sort of artist who doesn't do all that well in school. Somewhat ironically, because I did. But, you know, she's a sort of free spirit, you know, and she dresses outrageously, and, you know, that's another one of the tropes in the book. If you're like a sort of super fan, I mean, I listened to a podcast about the Babysitters Club, I'm not going to lie, called the Babysitters Club, available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Again, not sponsored. You know, Claudia's outfits are a trope that sort of, it's a little bit like an Easter egg on a DVD. Like, you're sort of repaid for loyalty by that. In fact, so much so that Claudia has actually become an iconic character, and she's spawned her own spin-off documentary, which I think is about 17 minutes on Netflix, called the Claudia Kishi Club, in which Asian American artists and writers, so on and so forth, talk about what a great influence she was as a character when they didn't feel that they had any other representation in either fiction or media. So that's really important to mention as well. I am aware that obviously this is from the perspective of, you know, a white cis-identifying author. I'm aware of that, but the fact that it was there meant something to people, so that's very valid. You know, interesting point actually. So Anna Martin is credited as the writer of all the books, but actually she only wrote, I believe, the first 35. I think it's 35. Yeah, up to Stacey and the Mystery of Stony Brook. And after that, they were ghostwritten by a team of ghostwriters, which is interesting, but also quite understandable as well, given the sort of how big the franchise became at the time. They were releasing a lot in a really quick turnaround to sort of capitalise on that, which does make a lot of sense, because, you know, particularly I think in America, maybe less so here, it was almost more of a cultural phenomenon for a particular demographic as opposed to just a book series. So, you know, they really had to capitalise on that. In the same way that, you know, look at, you know, bands like the Spice Girls, for instance, did a lot, massive Spice Girls fan, by the way, did a lot in terms of not just the music, but the movie, but the TV appearances, but the sponsorship deals, you know, and they were really aware that they had to capitalise on that straight away, and make the most of that moment. So, you know, that sort of makes sense, but that is a proviso. But as I said, with them being quite formulaic, they all follow a similar sort of vibe and feel and plotting, which is actually, well, maybe that's not what you always want to read in fiction. That is important, and it sort of allows for the ghostwriter thing to happen without us noticing like a sort of dip in quality and so on and so forth. I am aware that this video is merely skimming the surface, but I do think there is a lot to be gained from just talking about, you know, cultural properties that meant a lot to us, things that give us, you know, that beautiful glow of, and it is false in some ways, of you know, past enjoyments, you know, that sort of cliche about, you know, summers that didn't end. It's not really true, but they exist, and, you know, if they provide a bit of comfort, then I don't necessarily see what's wrong with that. Top tips that I would recommend reading: all the Claudia books for a start. Keep Out Claudia is a great one that deals with racism. Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls is an early one that is it doesn't completely deal successfully with certain issues, but around sort of stalking and so on and so forth. But I think it's definitely worth a read. It's an iconic one. All of the mysteries, I recommend all of them. Christie's Big Day, which deals with divorce, remarriage, and, you know, sort of blended families. You can, if you Google list of the Babysitters Club novels, there is a really good, I think, PDF from Scholastic, who published, that sort of goes through all of them. I'm just trying to think now of Jessie and the Awful Secret is a great one that touches on eating disorders. And one more, let's have one more, because that's 5 then, isn't it? Let's say... Stacey's Emergency. Let's look at Stacey's Emergency, which sort of deals with diabetes as a, you know, informative exercise that doesn't feel just like it's giving young people a lot of information. But I mean, they're all great, depending on your sort of particular area of interest. But I don't hesitate to recommend these for young people, but also older, slightly older people who are looking for a bit of a nostalgia hit. So yeah, as I say, I'm just scratching the surface here. It would take me absolutely hours, but I am aware that I'm trying to keep these videos as short as possible. So the Babysitters Club, check it out on Netflix. It's wonderful. Check out some of the books. You can read them in like a day, less than a day, depending. And also check them out on audio version. The first 5 have been re-recorded and narrated by the fantastic actress Elle Fanning, and the rest are also available with various narrators from, I believe, Audible. So that's it for this time, my little 80s, 90s throwback. Send off in the comments, have you ever read The Babysitters Club? If not, what were your favourite sort of young adult or preteen things? What do you go back to now that you remember from your childhood that brings you a little bit of comfort? And in the next episode, we will be back to... Service as Normal, and I will be discussing one particular book, which is Terraformed by Joy White. So check that out as usual in the description. Have a look at those vegan guys, Down to Earth Vegan, and also the other links I will post about various organisations, charities, and people that I know. So put your library cards safe now. Make sure they're wiped clean, because the weather could do anything these days. I'm telling you. Look after yourselves, keep turning those pages, and I will see you in the next episode. Much love.